At Chipotle, we also have a playlist. Guacamole as it's being hand-mashed. The sizzle of adobo chicken on the grill. The chopping of onions and cilantro. We call our playlist Real. Order now. Chipotle. For real.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Buying a car shouldn't eat up your week. That's why Carvana made it convenient. Car buying that fits around your life, not the other way around. You can get pre-qualified for an auto loan in just a couple of minutes and browse thousands of quality car options, all within your terms, all online, all on your schedule. Turn car buying into a few clicks and not a full week's endeavor. Finance and buy your car at your convenience on Carvana. Financing subject to credit approval. Additional terms and conditions may apply.
Gather around now, you're in for a story. Old tales of lore, all in search of a glory. The history and mystery of lads, lasses and all. Discoveries and voyages, the rise and the fall. Follow me now as we go back in time. We trace the steps of Irish lineage to find. Joseph from Carlisle and Kevin from Dog. Guide you through the ways of Shine's
Episode 3. We're going to finish up strong. We've talked
the
about...
The bastard gets what he deserves.
The bastard gets what he deserved. We're talking about Mr. B, John Grace, MC, Timothy Dwyer, Mr. Brown, Ducky, the big fella. These are...
Ducky?
Yeah, that's what Kitty Kiernan calls him, apparently, in the letters.
Kitty and Ducky, huh?
Yeah, but some of the many names that he went under for those 5 or so key years between like 1916 and the Truce. I think that's where we gotten up to in the last episode. They've just got to the Truce, which is, it's the anniversary of that, like this weekend.
Yes, but that's why, and we didn't realise, but tell everyone now, we didn't know when we started this that everyone was going to be, the rest is history after stealing our idea.
That's true. They inceptioned us. They got in, stole it before we even had it. But to be fair, we started it 6 months ago.
Yeah, we just never released it.
We just didn't. It just took us this long to get around to it. But
hey, anyone who came to the live show saw it.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, we kind of everyone missed the centenaries of all this sort of stuff during. It was all happening during COVID, I guess, which was probably for the best. COVID meant we couldn't go outside and do anything, so everyone just got to gloss over the Civil War centenaries. But yeah, I think Empire is doing all the stuff about the War of Independence at the minute as well. But all the events are happening. Like, it's the anniversary of all these things. 103-year anniversary of the Truce and the Civil War and all that sort of stuff this summer. But instead of checking out Empire and the rest is history and all those other, British-led podcasts, you can go check out Kevin Dolan's History of Ireland. One-time guest of the show. He's got a really good podcast that just goes through the whole War of Independence and the treaty negotiations and all that sort of stuff, which we're going to get into the divisive parts in this episode. Up until this point, you couldn't really fault them, I suppose. We talked about in the last episode maybe that by the end of the War of Independence, lads are getting a bit tetchy about the lack of gun supplies. And Mick is kind of like, the figurehead for that. But really, he just can't get guns into the country. For the most part, everyone's pretty happy with what he's done up until now, I'll say. And now we're going to get into Mick, the negotiator, and the treaty and the first year of the Civil War. So this whole episode will cover about a year, the last year in his life. Well, before that, I guess as a re-summary, I wanted to give two quotes I found about him that kind of sum him up to this point. The first one is from Tom Barry. At first, I thought it was odd that all those men should have had interviews with an officer who nominally held the rank of DI, Director of Intelligence, about matters which were no concern of the Intelligence Department. That is before I realised that Michael Collins was virtually Commander-in-Chief, in fact, if not in name, of the Army of the Irish Republic. Before meeting Collins, I had often heard officers from the southern units remark that the only way to get General Headquarters to do things was to see Mick about it. There was a unanimous feeling amongst the field officers that Mick would back them to the hilt, and that of all the people in Dublin, he was the practical go-getter. So, that's Tom Barry talking about the importance. Mick is like the guy, in his eyes or in his estimation, over the forces during the War of Independence. And then a second quote, just for a bit of balance. This is from Mary Plunkett. So this is via her son, Owen. He says this is what his mother thought about Mick. Mary Plunkett would have known Collins when he was around about, when he's working for George Plunkett, when he was Joseph Plunkett's aide-de-camp. Owen said this about him. My mother knew Mick Collins well. He had an office in her flat and she despised him. He was a pup, a nasty piece of work. Whenever he came into their living room, the carpet on the living room floor was surrounded by a timber floor, but he walked on the timber part. Why? Because it made more noise. That's the sort of fella that he was. She and he were both from West Cork. She recognised him for what he was. That's called balanced journalism.
I'd do the same. If you walked on the carpeted part, you'd drag the blood of thousands of Englishmen all across that carpet.
Hey, listen, I don't know what to tell you. He was a pup in the estimations of one of the Plunketts.
Honestly, that sounds like he's been sound where it goes right, it might make more noise, but if he's walking through a carpeted floor with shoes, you're going like, all right, I'll walk on the wood part, it's easier to clean.
Yeah.
This feels like a proper Larry David moment.
It does, yeah, and we'll talk about it more. I want to do an episode about Grace Gifford, or Grace Gifford. She gets married to Joseph Plunkett in Kilmainham just before he's executed, and I'm pretty sure the Plunketts don't recognise the marriage, and she doesn't get any money from them. So the Plunketts, I don't know. Here's Mary Plunkett calling our Mick Collins a young pup, a lout, dragged up by the ears. So anyway, that's a bit of balance. I think those two quotes sum up the first two episodes. That's all we need. So here we go. 11th of July, 1921. There's a truce. The War of Independence comes to a truce, and a month later, Eamon de Valera, Arthur Griffith, and some other delegates will go over to start peace talks. Whatever happened in those initial peace talks, Dev doesn't like it. There's a lot of speculation, I suppose, as to what happens, but I guess the idea is that maybe he realises that there won't be an independent Ireland.
He's almost definitely told by Lloyd George that that's not going to happen, and the most they could ever hope for is something like akin to this.
Yeah, probably. Maybe there's also... All right, so just for balance, I suppose, yeah, a lot of what you hear is like, oh, he realises he's not going to get what he wants. What he does is send Collins over then to his death. But there's also, like, people like Collins.
He could have possibly thought, look, I didn't get it. What if we go another tact and this guy's more charming and also you might be more afraid of him because he's a lunatic who'll have you shot.
There's a lot of talk about, like, he does it to root out Collins. So after this, Collins's anonymity is gone. He's now a public-facing figure. He's a delegate. He's a negotiator. And it's a nefarious move by the Snake Man to get rid of an opponent. Or maybe people like Collins. All the anecdotes are about how sort of affable he is. He's a kind of big figure. He loves laughing, supposedly drinking pints. Maybe he's a teetotaler. Who knows? That's the mystique of him. But he's a guy people like to be around, as opposed to Eamon de Valera.
The way you describe the pinting thing does make him seem like an off-the-wagon alcoholic. Where he's like, no, I won't touch it. And then every so often someone will meet him like, he is class.
Yeah.
He's on the points.
This is just, we could go on a tangent about, like, cultural context and revisionism. I think, I don't know, historians probably like the idea. Like, and he wasn't like your typical Irishman. He was, obviously I'm biased. I want him to be a big pinting, good crack man because it's funny. So who knows? You can't trust any source on this. I'm sure all the British podcasts, when they talk about it, they also say he's a big pint man, but they say that because of racism. I think he's a big pint man because of good crack. But whatever the truth of it is, Dev leaves the negotiations and Collins is kind of tipped to do it. Collins is a bit reluctant to head over, but on the 14th of December, basically, the Dáil picks the negotiators. The Dáil picks 5... Do you want to have a shot at pronouncing this word just so that we're both in the same
Plenipotentiaries.
Plenipotentiaries. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
What?
Plenipotentiaries.
Okay.
Don't worry, I'll be editing most of that out. But the plenipotentiaries, the people who have the power invested by Dev to sign a treaty. So you've got Collins, obviously Arthur Griffith still involved, then Robert Barton, Edmund Duggan, and George Gavin Duffy. We'll talk about them in a little bit, but apparently Cathal Brugha and Austin Stack, they managed to avoid going. They're also tipped for it, and they managed to talk themselves out of it.
But isn't that because Carl Brewer doesn't like Collins?
Yeah, I realized that I skipped over that bit in the second episode, but yeah, there's a lot of I think just that again, people kind of say it's jealousy maybe between the two of them, that Carl Brewer is more public facing during the War of Independence as like a political entity, but Collins is the guy, kind of as Tom Barry says there, Collins is the guy that everyone goes to for stuff, and maybe Brewer thinks he has too much power. I don't know. Again, so much of this is just speculation, but
or maybe as a Dublin Jackeen, he just has an inbuilt hatred for West Cork.
Maybe it could easily be that, but whatever it is, this is the team that gets sent over. This is one of many instances of articles saying, as Collins famously says, "I go in the spirit of a soldier who acts against his best judgment at the orders of a superior officer," as he infamously says, and then you can't find any record of him actually saying that, but that's the sort of spirit that he has when he's going over. The reluctant negotiator. Also in this period, he announces his engagement during the early sort of treaty negotiations. He's an awkward man when it comes to love. But on the 8th of October, he gets engaged to Kitty Kiernan, who, when they met, he was initially more interested in her sister, realized that she was already engaged, so tactical maneuver, goes on to the next sister. But
that's a very smart move. But is it just in the film, or is it true in real life that she had some sort of a tryst, or whatever? Was she seeing Harry Boland?
She was seeing Harry Boland, yeah, which doesn't really make any sense. So he's cracking on to one sister. She is already engaged, so he moves on to the next sister, who seems to. There's lots of letters between her and Harry. Basically, they're already courting, but he doesn't mind that. So,
well, he hasn't put a ring on it yet, Kev.
No. Who's she played by in the movie? Julia Roberts?
Julia Roberts, yeah.
Does a great Irish accent, probably. But there's there's one letter from Boland who says... So a lot of the romantic letters seem to be from Boland. Not so much romance on the Kitty Collins side. But...
What's he talking about?
I don't know. Just sort of... I mean, to be honest, a lot of the letters are in museums. You can read through them all. I did... many searches for what are the interesting bits, the love details, where was the romance between them, and there wasn't a whole lot. Not to say that there wasn't romance between them, but they're quite to be fair, when they're doing a lot of their letter writing, he's busy negotiating for the country's independence, and then later trying not to be shot in the street like a dog. So there's not a whole lot of time for romance. There's one line from Boland where he says to her that she's the pulse of his heart. You don't really get that much stuff of that nature from Collins. But Boland also said,
did Collins ever try that again with with his speech, where he goes, he just said, "Kitty, I love you," and that is all more than anything Fenian would ever need to say.
Yeah, he walked into the house and started shooting the ceiling. I was like, that's all that needs to be said for a true Fenian marriage. But another line from Boland, I guess, he says that no matter what manner our triangle may work out, he and I shall always be friends. So that's another
the owl triangle.
The owl triangle. That's what the owl triangle was about. It was about Kitty Kiernan, Harry Boland, and Collins. But Collins wins out in the end anyway, and they eventually have plans to marry around the 8th of October. So it's right before he heads up for the treaty debate. He actually shows up a day after all the rest of the lads because he's busy getting engaged. But we'll talk about Harry Boland will show up a lot in this episode, and definitely this is an interesting angle. That I think in the movie they kind of lean into this a good bit. Harry Boland is an amalgamation of a couple of Collins's close friends, but I think they lead into it because this is a very interesting angle. They're courting the same woman, and then Collins ends up getting engaged to her. And as we see in the next, him and Boland bash heads a lot over the next year, basically. But so he's heading over. He's an engaged man. He's going over to London. The delegation is Griffith and Collins. Robert Barton, who's the Minister for Economic Affairs and former British officer, described as having all the Republican zeal of a convert. There's Eamon Duggan, a legal expert and a member of the Truce Committee, and George Gavin Duffy, who was the Dáil envoy in Rome. You've also got some classics, some heavy hitters in as part of the envoy. Erskine Childers is in there as secretary, and Ned Broy, one of Collins's big informants. He makes a reappearance here as part of the team. You've also got Emmett Dalton, who will show up at the end, but he's a big integral part of Collins's entourage at this stage. And
Was Ned Broy gone from the DMP at this stage? He's been kicked out.
So I hadn't realized that, like, Ned Broy, he's an informant, but then after that he gets like a pretty big role in the new government. He goes on to like be the head of the Dublin Police in like 1925, I think. But like he gets sorted out even after Collins gets killed. In the new government, Dev gives him a pretty big role in the police force.
Okay.
Yeah, he's involved in Irish politics for like the next 30 or 40 years. So fair play to Ned. But this is a funny story that sounded mad, but then I'd seen it written that Ned Broy sorted this out, and then there's a documentary interview with Emmett Dalton where I have the name of it later on, but basically it's a big interview with him in the 80s that gets all of his recollections. And basically between the two of them, they said that they managed to sort a plane for Collins when he was in London, just in case he needed to escape. I think the story was that they had some Irish volunteers planted in the Canadian Forestry Department, and they got them to get the British to buy them a plane so they could look out for forest fires. And they just kept the gassed up in Croydon in case Mick ever needed to escape in a hurry during the negotiations. And apparently they called the plane the Big Fella. The whole thing sounds insane, but watching a like 80-year-old Emmett Dalton talk about it in full earnestness it's very funny. But so they've got the plane gassed up, ready to go in case the negotiations go south. But Collins has revealed himself. You know, the man of mystery. He's now in all the newspapers. People are talking about him. He's one of the big negotiators. Before we move on from Ned Broy, actually, this is a good quote of his I found from Ulick O'Connor's biography. So yeah, like he starts off as an informant for Mick, and he's talking about sometime he's handing over codes and stuff to Collins, and then they get busted by a raid. Officers come down and start shaking people up or whatever. And he says, Collins had his socks full of papers with names on them, military codes. The impudent fellow went straight up to the officer in charge of the search party and chatted with him. The officer fell victim to the charm of Mick, who had him roaring with laughter. The other soldiers, seeing that Mick was chatting with their commanding officer, assumed he was a friend, and we were let through without examination. I was sweating, but it didn't seem to take a feather out of Mick. He was chuckling all the way down the road as if he was going to his office.
Did you see his old military code stuffed in his socks?
Yeah.
There has to be a better place to store.
Where would you put them?
His brain.
Yeah.
He's an autistic numbers man. All of those codes should be up there.
That is true. He's an autistic numbers man. We'll make those sweeping claims in a little bit, but I thought that was a good estimation by Ned Broy. Again, speaks to the sort of charming man that maybe Dev never became, and a good charming man to send over as part of this delegation to talk to the British negotiators, who were made up of Lloyd George, the Prime Minister at the time. You've also got Lord Birkenhead, Austin Chamberlain, a little man called Winston Churchill, Sir Lamming Worthington Evans, the Secretary of War, and Sir Hammer Greenwood, the Chief Secretary of Ireland. So that's the team. I guess in the fullness of time, when you look at all of the negotiations, it basically boils down to Griffith and Collins on one side, and then Griffith's quite sick, so he sort of disappears as well. So it's basically, after a while, it seems to be mostly just Collins on one side, and then Churchill and Birkenhead on the other side. They seem to be the main negotiators. Winston Churchill, I sent you that list there during the week, voted in 2002 by a BBC poll the top Briton of all time in a list of 100.
No, that wasn't Winston. That was the other Churchill.
Which Churchill?
Oh, yeah.
That was the insurance dog. Sorry, that was for a second there, I thought they'd lost their mind. It's a great list. There's Churchill number 1, Cromwell number 10, and then James Connolly's like number 64. It's insane. But Winston Churchill, greatest Briton of all time, 2002 poll. The man who maybe didn't directly deploy the Black and Tans to Ireland, but he would have been Secretary of State of War when that happened, so it happened under his watch. Also during these negotiations, the Black and Tans, the auxiliaries, job's done. Job's a good one as far as they're concerned. They've burnt down Cork. They've killed civilians. They've ran up and down the country shooting lads. Now there's a truce. They've got nothing to do in this sort of autumn of 1921. But luckily, there's a little place called Palestine that needs some help from the old British forces. So during this time, Churchill deploys the Black and Tans to Palestine. Another similarity between our two nations. But We'll talk about that more. We've got a Palestine
There's enough
episode
in
coming up soon, but
yeah.
I just thought that was a fun little connection during these negotiations. He's like, well, the boys are kicking stones, may as well send them over to the Middle East. Anyway, the negotiations are happening in 10 Downing Street. All the fellas are getting round the table, bang out the key issues of this new Anglo-Irish Treaty. They're talking about Irish sovereignty versus maybe Dominion status. The British are pushing Dominion status. The Irish lads want full independence. There's the issue of the allegiance to the crown. This becomes like a big sticking point, I guess. When they bring the treaty back to Ireland, there's an oath of allegiance that they want, that the British want in this treaty. So there's a swear of fealty to the monarch of the day. There's the status of Northern Ireland, which we touched on in the last episode, but basically in late 1920, there's already two governments set up with, I think at this point, James Craig is the Prime Minister in the North, or the head of the Northern government. So it's already been split into two areas, even under British rule, North and Southern government. But they're trying to negotiate around the Northern issue. And then there's control of ports. So what would be referred to later on as the treaty ports during Dev's time. But there's 3 strategic ports that the British want to keep open on the island of Ireland for defence. So these are the big issues. And the lads are hashing it out over the next couple of weeks. So this next anecdote is from Winston Churchill's own website, which obviously is very biased towards Churchill. But supposedly, him and Collins develop a kind of camaraderie, I don't know, a begrudging respect, as you see in any action movie from the 90s. But during the negotiations, supposedly, during one tense moment, Collins shouts, "You hunted me night and day. You put a price on my head." And Churchill supposedly replied, "Whoa, wait a minute, you're not the only one." And he took down something from his wall and showed it to him as a framed copy of a reward that was offered by the Boers during the Boer War. And he says, "At any rate, it was a good price. You got 5,000. Look at me, £25, dead or alive. How would you like that?" And supposedly Collins looked at it and he broke into a hearty laugh and all irritation vanished. We had a really serviceable conversation, and thereafter, though I must admit that deep in my heart there was a certain gulf between us, we never, to the best of my belief, lost the basis of a common understanding. So that's from Churchill's own memoirs. In that, he also says that later on he found out that there was no reward offered by the British government.
For Collins?
For Collins, he says, actually no reward had ever been offered by British government, but I did not know this at the time.
I had heard that there's reports of it being £1,000.
£1,000, £5,000, £10,000. This is another one of those things that's repeated everywhere, and I can't find a contemporary source for it, but I'm going to say yes, and that Churchill website is pro-Churchill. So
I would imagine so. Usually the websites that are named after the person.
Yeah.
That's... No, I'd heard that it was like £1,000 and maybe at some point they got to like 2,000. I'd never heard 5 because that would have been big money, I guess.
5, and then a lot of places have reported it as 10. It might have been a general one for the head of intelligence without naming him specifically. I don't know. Anyway, that's a pretty funny exchange though. They're having fun, they're having a good time. But obviously the negotiations are also very tense. We got letters from him back to Katie Kieran at this time. I think he's going to mass like every day. He's stressing out about it. There's obviously a lot of pressure on him. People later on would say that the lads were too quick for him, the British delegate, that they were happy to see him instead of Dev. There's a later famous quote from Lloyd George where he says, "Negotiating with De Valera was like trying to pick up mercury with a fork," which, and maybe Collins was an easier man for them to deal with. Collins supposedly might have felt the same. This is another unattributed quote, but, sort of secondhand sources say that he used to, after some of the tough days when he was walking out, he'd say, "That long whore has got me." And he blamed Dev for sending him over to be fucked for Ireland. But another bit that may or may not be true, we talked about this in the Roger Casement episodes, but apparently at some point during these negotiations, Birkenhead brings Collins and Eamon Duggan to go see Roger Casement's Black Diaries. So this is the diaries with all of the intense sexual details. They are
of Casement's time in Congo.
Yes. So Duggan says later on that happened, and that Mick identified that it was Casement's writing in the diaries. And maybe that was a kind of power play to be like, look at this. Maybe you give us Fermanagh and we don't say nothing about it. Who knows? But by on the 5th of December, Lloyd George gives them an ultimatum. He says the Collins and the Irish delegate need to sign this treaty, or there will be an immediate and terrible war.
Before we go into the treaty part, then, just do we mention about that a lot of people say that he loved pints and he got swept up in just being in London again because he hadn't been there for a long time, and now he had a bit of money, a bit of clout about him, kind of famous. He was going to West End shows. He was buying fur coats. He was having pints. He was having an affair with Lady Hazel Lavery.
Yeah, some people say he was seduced almost literally by London and Lady Hazel. I don't think that any of that is true. I think that's another
it's straight after. Yeah, look, it's disinformation or whatever. It's to paint him in a bad light.
Exactly.
He'd literally just gotten engaged, and then they say that, oh, well, sure, do you know that she was like she was the descendant of Irish American or Irish lad that moved to the States and done very well, but her husband was the portrait artist brought over to draw the treaty.
Yeah,
I guess, and like to get portraits of the lads who were involved in the treaty. And he was Irish. How could you do it, Mick? How could you do that to an Irishman? Foreshadowing, maybe.
His own countrymen. There's newspaper reports at the time which refer to Hazel as his darling, I think, or something like that. And in the letters between him and Kitty, bit of playful banter back and forth where she's like, oh, what's this about? You and your darling, I'm reading in the papers. I swear to God, Mick, I'll fucking kill you. Bail in the blow, I'm telling you. If you fuck around with me over there, I'll have you done. So, yeah, I think a lot of that is just kind of...
Jesus, Mick, when was the last time you saw Harry? He's in great shape.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, don't worry, Mick. Don't rush home. Me and Harry's been here every night looking after me. He's a great man. Yeah, a lot of that's probably like the idea that... Because I think he's staying in separate quarters himself, like him and his staff. And he's going to these negotiations every day and mass every morning. Although maybe that's just a lie he's putting in the letters. And the idea that he somehow got a bad deal or sold out the country because he was in London again. And like, I don't know, went on the pints and met one of the other people he's supposed to hang around with at the time was like J.M. Barrie, the guy who wrote Peter Pan.
I hadn't heard that.
I don't know. The idea that he's sort of swept up by these socialites in London.
Are you Sir Arthur Conan Doyle?
Yeah. I've got his number, Mick. You want to meet him? I don't know. Again, this is all speculation. Maybe he's happy to be back in London. I doubt it. He's under a lot of stress at the time and doesn't seem to be really happy with anything. So, I don't know.
Yeah, but it's probably one of those things of like if you're working morning, noon and night and then once a week you get 2 hours off for morale around the camp and they bring you out to do something and they're like, see, he's pissing it all away.
Yeah, you got done dirty in the... Also, yeah, like British media is reporting about Big Mick boozing on West End. Obviously, that's going to play it well back home. But... That's all all that stuff's happening during the negotiations, perhaps. And on the 5th of December, 1921, Lloyd George gives him an ultimatum: sign this treaty or immediate and terrible war. Collins, he later says in the Dáil that he later insists that he's not coerced into signing it. He says, I did not sign the treaty under duress, except in the sense that the position as between Ireland and England, historically, and because of the superior forces on the part of England, has always been one of duress. The element of duress was present when we agreed to the truce, because our simple right would not have been to beat the English out of Ireland. There was an element of duress in going to London to negotiate, but there was not, and could never have been, any personal duress. The threat of immediate and terrible war did not matter over much to me. The position appeared to be then exactly as it appears now. The British would not, I think, have declared a terrible immediate war on us. Which is a lot to say, not very much there. So like, I wasn't under duress, apart from 800 years of duress.
And he's saying he didn't think that the English would start a war. Then why sign the treaty?
I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. He's under a lot of pressure, right? Leave him alone. You know, he's out drinking with Peter Pan. He doesn't know what he's talking about at this time. But either way, both of them sign the treaty. It's signed on all sides at around 2 a.m. on the 6th of December, 1921. Supposedly, and this is a quote that gets thrown around a lot, but this is one variation of it. Supposedly Birkenhead says to him while they're signing, Mr. Collins, I may have just signed my political death warrant. And Collins says, I may have signed my actual death warrant, which is good bit of banter for 2 a.m. I may have signed my death warrant is the thing that shows up a lot around him. There's a variation of it in a letter that he does send the next morning. He says, think what I have got for Ireland. Will anyone be satisfied? I tell you this, early this morning I signed my own death warrant. I thought at the time, how odd, how ridiculous a bullet might just as well have had the job done 5 years ago. So that's, he's written it there, but maybe he was just throwing that quip out the whole week. So please sign my death warrant.
He might have just been non-stop at it. And I'll because I photographed a thing before for, I can't say for, I'm not allowed to say who it was, but I'll tell you what he does for a living. It was the Taoiseach of Ireland. And I saw him go around, and every single person as they walk through Rathmine shaking hands with people, he would just robotically, they would go, "Well done to you, Mr. Taoiseach, you're doing a great job. Well, if I could just get a couple of 100,000 houses built." And he said that, I'd say, 50 times in a row.
Well, who was this robotic Taoiseach that promised to deliver housing but never actually did anything? It's a long list. But the treaty is signed. It establishes the idea of an Irish Free State, creates the Irish Free State under a Dominion status similar to Canada, I suppose, at the time. There is an oath of allegiance in it, which is a very contentious issue. There's a boundary commission set up. Basically, Northern Ireland is given the option to either join or opt out at this stage. And if they opt out, there'll be a boundary commission set up to talk about the future of the North. And then the British hold on to treaty ports for defence. So that's the treaty. This is also a bit that I think gets kind of skipped over in these, talks about Collins and Dev. He does sign it without, he signs it. He's the, what was the word?
Plenipotentiary.
Yeah, the plenipotentiary, of course. So he has the authority to sign it. But it's like, it has to be voted on in the Dáil. I think it always sounds like, and he did it, didn't even bloody tell the fellas back home. Like, they signed this there and then, but with the idea and the understanding that it won't be ratified until it's voted on in the Dáil. So they go back and debate it for like 3 months. It's not as if he sneaks this away. Like, Dev has an ample opportunity, and we'll talk about that in the next bit. Like, they all talk about the treaty for ages.
Yeah, it's a fair vote. But also now it's just weird that he said, I'd never heard that quote before, that he's like, I don't think they would have done war. They wouldn't have come at us with war. So, well, then why sign?
There's another quote, I might just paraphrase it because it's long, but basically he's talking about like a treaty is a man's bond and it's a man's word, and you go and you sign a treaty and all this sort of stuff. And when he goes back for these negotiations, he's like, yeah, it's just fucking, it's a stepping stone. It's not over. We'll do more. So that's all in the space of a couple of weeks where he's like, he doesn't think they're going to go to war, but he signs the treaty anyway. He's signing the treaty, but he's like, well, we won't do it. We'll just do what we want later on. I don't know. But whatever it is, this is the version of it that they go back with. Collins and Griffith return back with the treaty, and it's debated heavily in the Dáil for the next couple of weeks. But it's not popular on all sides in Britain either. It's not just like the anti-treaty side that are against it. There's an anti-treaty side in Britain that think that the lads have been too lenient on the Irish. Specifically, two of the big figures that we'll talk about that'll come up later on. There's a man called Sir Henry Wilson, who thinks that Churchill has been too lenient. He said, why are you sending them back in tans to Palestine? The job's not done. Get them back in there. He thought that all along the lads have had too soft a touch on the Irish. And then, of course, there's a lot of consternation from Bonar Law, or at least I assume there is. It said that he was against it, and I figured throw in his name. It's pretty funny.
Well, yeah.
Future Prime Minister of England, Bonar Law, against the treaty. So
has he made an appearance in every episode so far?
Collins heads back. Who cares what Bonar Law and what Henry Wilson have to think about the damn thing? It's about what the Dáil thinks. So they're heading back to the Dáil to debate it. It needs to be voted on. You've got Collins and Griffith on one side, obviously proponents of the treaty, and Eamon de Valera and others on the other side. This is where Harry Boland comes back into it. He got, at this point, I think he's still in America. He's still, doing the money run, doing the gun run, that sort of stuff. He gets a telegram to come back to vote on the treaty.
So Dev left him in America on his own?
Yeah.
I mean, probably with somebody else, but as in like not with him as the senior.
Yeah. Dev needed to come back and start the negotiations and then back out of them. Maybe Dev just leaves more charming men to do his work for him, which is maybe fair. I don't know.
Delegating.
Like he's meant to be, he's the president. The roles, I always have a hard time keeping track of the roles because they all are, a lot of them are nominal. Like Dev, I think, is always in charge in theory, but like Griffith and Collins are usually the de facto leaders because Dev is away somewhere. Yeah. So it makes sense that he should probably be in the country during this. Like he shouldn't be in America during this period. He should at least be in theory, he should be in London, really, but he should at least be in Ireland. But
Failing that, he should be in Ireland beside a phone.
exactly. So they come back to debate the treaty. Collins famously says, in my opinion, it gives us freedom, not the ultimate freedom that all nations desire, but the freedom to achieve it. He refers to it as a stepping stone. There's a kind of famous phrase that's bantered around at this point that says, if it's good enough for Collins, it's good enough for us. If it's good enough for Mick Collins, it's good enough for Ireland, kind of thing. And a lot of people just agree with it because they trust Mick. But yeah, so this is during the Dáil speeches. He says, I cannot imagine anything more mean, anything more despicable, anything more unmanly than this dishonouring of one's signature. Rightly or wrongly, when you make a bargain, you cannot alter it. You cannot go back and get sorry for it and say, I ought to have made a better bargain. Business cannot be done on these bases. But then he's just like, yeah, it's a stepping stone. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's like... Yeah,
I cannot think of anything more unmanly or dishonouring. He's like, yeah, but fuck it, we'll just sign this now. Just ignore it. Which we'll talk about in the dev episode we'll do in a while. It's kind of what happens. They do just sort of...
It's
just stop
within
showing
about
up.
10 years. It's exactly what...
Yeah, you just stop showing up to meetings, you stop saying the oath. Eventually, you just leave. But at the time, they don't know that. There's big issues around the oath. That's the key sticking point. Also, the North has talked about... Collins basically says, well, sure, Dev, what the hell? If you had a better idea, let's see it. And Dev does produce it. It's referred to as Document 2. He comes up with his own draft of the treaty, which is very similar, but it leaves out the oath. That's the big sticking point for him. I think he just kind of ignores Northern Ireland. Not that so there's specific mentions of it in the Anglo-Irish Treaty. Dev doesn't put those in his treaty, but he doesn't make any special reference to it. So I don't know. He kind of leaves it out by omission. He's trying to get a unified Ireland.
Yeah, whereas Collins's idea would have been to let them have the 6 counties, and within a couple of years we'll have that down to 5 or 4, and then eventually we'll keep pushing the Unionists further up north into the northeastern part of it, and then it's just economically not viable. We'll get it back.
That's it. Well, I mean, we'll talk about Collins's approach to the north in a little bit, but basically, again, when he's talking about, I can't think of anything more unmanly than going back on your signature, what he does is have a series of open meetings with James Craig and then secret meetings with the IRA where he's like, just fucking get up there. Immediately. But anyway, so during the debates, Dev produces his Document 2. Later on, he says that there was only a small difference between the documents. It felt the distance between the two was so small that the British would not wage war on account of it. You may say if it was so small, why not take it? But I say that small difference makes all the difference. So it sounds like it's not that small of a difference at all. But
no.
And they're like, well, it's so small the British wouldn't even get annoyed. They wouldn't even wage war. But at the same time, it's everything, and we will go to war on this oath. But there's also an interesting point that Boland makes during these debates. In the Dáil, he says, is this, in your opinion, a final settlement of the question between England and Ireland? Collins says, it is not. Boland says, well then, we are asked to sign a treaty. What was it that made the fight in Ireland possible? The sanctities of treaty, the invasion of Belgium that gave a great moral cry to the world, that freedom was being outraged, and the whole world flew to the side of the Allies. Some of the best blood in Ireland fought with Great Britain in that war because Belgium had been outraged and her treaty violated. Which is kind of against the point we've just been talking about with Collins, who's like, right, well, if you... are you saying that this is the end? He's like, no, we'll go back and fight England. He's like, well, that's what started World War One. You can't sign a treaty with a fella with the intention of immediately going against it.
Yeah, but this time, we're the good guys.
Yeah, it's us. That one is that
different.
I know that's literally just happened, but it definitely won't happen again.
Also, this is on record.
Oh yeah, this is all.
Yeah,
you
which
can
is
read
a
all
crazy
this.
thing to I mean, the English would have been able to find this.
Well, this might be this. I think this was during the secret one. So they could only find it a couple of years later when they went on to the Rightist website and they're like, what the hell? Collins, you dirty dog, we were right to shoot you. But there's a very long and funny quote from Seamus Robinson as well, who was one of the solo head beg ambushers. One of the 4 that shot those RSC officers. He's, I don't know, he kind of sums up the anti-treaty side maybe of, there are many thousand enthusiastic supporters of the treaty simply because Michael Collins is its mother. Possibly Arthur Griffin's could be called his father. Now it is only natural and right that many people should follow almost blindly a great and good man. But suppose you know that such a man was not really such a great man, and that his reputation and great deeds of daring were in existence only on paper and in the imagination of people who read stories about him. If Mike Collins is the great man he's supposed to be, he has a right to influence people, and people ought to be influenced by him. Now, Dr. McCartan said that he could understand many people saying what is good enough for Michael Collins is good enough for me. Arthur Griffith has called Collins the man who won the war. The press has called him the commander-in-chief of the IRA. He has been called a great exponent of guerrilla warfare and the elusive Mike, and we all read the story of the White Horse. These are stories going around Dublin of fights he had all over the city, the Custom House in particular. If Michael Collins was all that he has been called, then I would admire him and respect his opinions. If my little mind cannot comprehend his present attitude towards the Republic and its treaty. Now, from my knowledge of character and psychology, which I'm conceited enough to think is not too bad, I'm forced to think that the reported Mike Collins could not possibly be the same Michael Collins who was so weak as to compromise the Republic. Really calling him out there.
Yeah, I thought there was going to be a bigger bombshell. I thought he was going to be like, well, I went for pints with him, and he said he actually loves the English.
But he's kind of talking to, I mean, so, you know, he's talking about the
London
myth.
was the happiest time of his life.
Yeah.
But you would think then is he trying to say that it's all PR and or is it just that because he's done this one thing that it means everything else he said is bollocks?
I get, yeah, either or.
Or is he trying to say that I've met this lad and what do you think about him? That's not true.
Yeah, either or. I'm not sure which angle he's either like. He's basically saying that it doesn't add up. Mick, the big hero, the big myth man that we've all heard about, wouldn't have done this. So either it's a lie or we've been duped.
Which is an interesting point. But
anyway, the debate's going for a couple of weeks. And on the 7th of January 1922, they have a vote. They vote on the treaty and it passes 64 to 57. So pretty close, but also, you know, they did vote on it.
4 votes in the difference, I guess. Like the 4 swing votes.
Yeah.
It's not a big difference when you're talking about the future of a nation.
It's the sort of thing that men that go to civil war over.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't spoil it for the listeners, Kevin.
Yeah. Well, up next, Civil War. The treaty splits the whole of Sinn Féin. I suppose Sinn Féin had only been, you know, everyone joined Sinn Féin after 1916. It's the big Republican Party. Now there's big splits, I guess, over the treaty, over the signing of the treaty. But in the new setup of the government after the treaty is ratified, Collins becomes chairman of the provisional government. De Valera resigns as president. He dips out. He's replaced by Arthur Griffith. So Griffith president, Collins the sort of essentially the Taoiseach, I suppose, the early version of the Taoiseach. And we're off. We've got a new Irish Free State. But just to throw in a bit of fun, I guess during the treaty debates, and we covered this in an earlier episode you can get on Head Stuff Plus probably, but Harry Boland comes back. When he comes back from America to vote in the treaty, he comes back with the Russian crown jewels in his pocket. Yes. And he gives them to Collins. I think it's the day before the treaty is ratified. It's obviously a tense time in the country, and there's already tension between them. Collins is engaged to his former lover. Mick, I know there's been a lot between us and, you know, the treaty debates, and I called you a liar in the Dáil record there. Let's put it all behind us. Here's some blood diamonds I got from Russia. So, again, there's a few quotes from Collins. I suppose he says, take them the hell out of that, they're blood-stained anyway. We do have a receipt from the time that shows that they were received, I suppose, as part of the government. And then, yeah, we talk about that in the Russian jewel episodes, but they pop up again over the next 30 or 40 years. But back to the matter at hand. Between January 15th and 16th of 1922, the British Army is ordered out of the new Free State of Ireland. Henry Wilson, as the chief of the Imperial General Staff, is entrusted with removing all the troops, which he's not happy about. But troops are leaving out, and as part of the negotiations, as part of the new handover, Dublin Castle is given to the Irish. And Mick is there when the Union Jack is taken down and the Irish tricolour is hoisted up over the castle. And the Lord Lieutenant of Ireland, Fitzalan, he's supposed to hand over to Collins. And this is another maybe completely made up story, but supposedly it's a big ceremony, big handing over ceremony, and Collins is late. Shows up about 15 minutes late, and Lord Fitzalan, he's not happy. You know, he goes to shake his hand, but when he's doing that, he pulls him in close. He's like, "What the devil, Mick? You're 15 minutes late." And Collins says, "We've been waiting 700 years. You can have the extra 15 minutes." And then he winks at him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that all the way up to 90 minutes.
Yeah. He showed up 4 weeks late. He says, "You've had it 700 years."
Every man in the country was rose 20 men deep around Dublin Castle, and Mick had to stop and get a De Guerre for the photograph with every single one of them. Stand there still for about 20 minutes there, Mick.
Yeah.
Right, who's next? Come on.
But now, you've got the rumblings of a civil war in the background, but the country's setting up.
But I've heard that story so often because I tell it all the time on Walking Dirt. But
another classic lie.
It does seem mad though that if the country's at it, the cusp, it's civil war time basically.
Yeah.
If Dublin Castle was surrounded by people like that, and Collins was shaking the hands of every man along the way, and that's what made him late because he was too busy being a man of the people, someone would have shot him.
No, because the Civil War hasn't started yet, and so it's hard to. So all the press talks about how everyone's pro treaty, but I don't know. I think people are happy enough that like they've been through war.
Yeah, we're not fighting at the minute.
Yeah. Well, a little after that, the famous footage of him when he's like giving his big shouting speech on O'Connell Street or Sackville Street. That happens. There's a couple of weeks after that. There's a lot of people there. You can see the video footage panning over the place. The whole place is wedged, and there's no attempt made at him.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. Also, we didn't have guns. There was the big problems with the fighting the English.
Let him have his day. You know, the castle is being handed back. The castle has been a symbol of Anglo-British oppression on the island for hundreds of years. If you're going to shoot him, give him, not that day. Let that happen first. Then shoot him. But heading into, we talked about this a little bit there, I suppose. He starts having his first meetings with James Craig, who's the new head of the new northern state, the new Northern Ireland, basically. The occupied 6 counties we'll go with. James Craig is in charge of that. We might do a separate episode on this at some point, but there's another Troubles, basically, in 1920, 21, 22 that isn't really talked about at all. I realize I'm saying that as we're not talking about it, but they've got, what's referred to as like the Belfast pogroms. Basically, Catholics are being rooted out of Belfast and the North during all this time. So Collins is kind of talking to Craig about easing off on the Catholic. I think there's talk about them. They're being fired from work in the shipyards and different bits like that. And he's like, "Well, could you stop doing that and just let the Catholics live up there?" And Craig says, "Well, will you stop having the IRA run up here and shoot stuff?" And Collins is like, "I don't know what you're talking about." Whoa. The IRA? What the? Who?
The Irish Republican Army. The IRA.
Do you think this was his version of the this thing of ours?
You
talking about the IRA? What are you talking about? This is ridiculous.
Yeah, you never address this thing of ours, but it is true. He is secretly. So this is he has 3 meetings with Craig. I think one of them Churchill sits in on over the next couple of months. But this is where maybe the wheels start to. I don't know. I don't know what his plan here is, because he's just signed this treaty. He's openly having public talks with Craig. He's the statesman, but behind the scenes, he's still the old chief, the gun runner, the smuggler, send the lads up to do a bit of shooting. But now, I don't know. I don't know how he thinks this would work in the long term. Because they seem to know that he's at it as well.
See, it's they do a great job of it in the Wind That Shakes the Barley, when they go around and play the video of like the treaty. Yeah, to cinemas and just like town halls all around the country, because there's a time before audio, I think, it would have existed in film, so it's just here's just text on screen, and it says like, this is what we signed up for, and all your fighting was for this. But like basically it's lads screaming in a town hall, so you're not even getting all the information, and it's very difficult to turn around and be like, no, I'm reading through the lines here. He's saying that he's going to go back on everything he's already signed up for. Yeah. And he's going to be a snake about this, and we're going to be absolutely grand. It's like, that's not how it. And it's a lot of faith to have in a man who also went over and signed the treaty. Like, nah, I'm sure I'm sure he's going to do it. I'm sure what all of this is.
The man who's like, I can't think of a thing more cowardly than going back on your word. But then winking a nod is like, well, someone's running
That's
the
our
IRA.
Mick. That's our Mick. He's a coward, a cute coward.
A cute whore. I tell you what, it's not Eamon de Valera instructing the troops up there. Some say he was trying to stop the Civil War by giving the IRA something to do. Like there's now the IRA in the North and the South, and he's saying, why don't you join up and try and, fight about the border. That'll keep you together at least, and not shooting at me. But tensions are building up. People are annoyed. On the 10th of April, he writes to Kitty Kiernan in one of his letters. He says, things are rapidly becoming as bad as they can be, and the country has before it what may be the worst period yet. If you madmen could do anything, indeed, they are just getting under pressure gradually. They go on from cutting a tree to cutting a railway line, then firing at a barrack, then to firing at a lorry, and so on. But God knows I do not want to be worrying you with these things, he says as he worries her with those things.
As he's just said all of it.
Yeah, he's written it down. He could have got rid of the letter. Anyway.
He just sent the same letter, but it scratched all of that out.
Yeah.
Just one X through it, just be like, don't read that.
Never mind that. I don't want to worry about these things, so I won't. But he can feel the things are escalating, and the escalation builds up to 4 days after that. On the 14th of April, the lads occupy the Four Courts in Dublin. So you've got Rory O'Connor, who I briefly mentioned in the last episode. There's Tom Barry, who we've had a good few quotes from, and others take over the Four Courts in Dublin as an act of defiance against the pro-treaty side. So there's about 200 anti-treaty IRA men, or 200 irregulars, are occupying the Four Courts, and just as an act of defiance against the government, they've taken over, similar, I guess, the lads taken over the GPO in 1916. They've taken over like a big government building, basically as a fuck you to Collins and the new government.
Yeah. Now, I'd say, to go out on a limb here and say, this is what kicks it all off.
Yeah.
This is bad.
I didn't realize how long that happened. I thought that was like, that happens, and they're like, all right, get in, sort that out quickly. They're in there for like a month or more. They're in there for over a month.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because they're like, if the English were in charge at the time, that would have lasted a day or two.
Wow.
And
yes,
the whole thing would have been shelled instantly. What we actually did was let it go on for a couple of weeks, and then we just did what the English would have done.
Well, yeah, some say the English were in charge, but I just thought this happened over a much shorter period than it did. But that happens anyway. Big fuck you to the government. They're occupying the courts. During May 1922, sorry, it goes on for like 2 months. So that's April. But anyway, so during May, Harry Boland is trying to broker a sort of reconciliation between Dev and Collins. They, I think, meet it up on the 20th of May, but it falls apart. They can't come up with, I think they come up with a deal, and then whatever the deal is, like, it won't fly with the British. So they get called over and the thing has to be ripped up. But Boland is there. He's seen as one of the more level-headed anti-treatyites. And he's a negotiator trying to like stop the early parts of the Civil War at this stage, which hasn't officially kicked off, but he's trying to get ahead of it, I suppose. But there's an election on the 16th of June. Collins gets back in by a landslide, and it's kind of seen as, I guess, given a voice of confidence for the treaty at this stage. But the big event that happens after the election, 22nd of June, 1922, Henry Wilson, who we've been teeing up a little bit as a British anti-treaty thorn in the side, he gets assassinated. Field Marshal in World War I.
The assassination of coward Henry Wilson by the legend Michael Collins.
Yes, well, allegedly. So basically, Henry Wilson, big anti-treaty guy. He's a military advisor to the Northern government, and supports like harsh. He's pushing the big crackdowns on Catholics and nationalists. There had been a plan from Collins to have him assassinated during the War of Independence, apparently. He referred to him as a violent orange partisan. So there had been like a scheme to kill him. But when he does get shot, he gets shot in London by two IRA men, Reginald Dunn and Joseph O'Sullivan. They are responsible for shooting him. And people blame Collins.
Well, because he has the history of doing things like this.
Yes.
That he's taken all of the credit for all of the guerrilla warfare tactics and all of the assassinations that has happened up until this point. So it would make sense that, well, but also, who knows?
He's like a very hated. He's very hardline, very easy figure to hate at a tense time. He's very anti-Catholic, anti-nationalist. So many a man would want to shoot him, and there's many a reason that he would have been shot. But Collins, I guess this is the sort of thing that he is doing in the background. He's. I think Churchill and them suspect or know that he is running the IRA operations around the border.
Yeah, he's doing secret meetings. He's clearly playing both sides. He's planning on good reneging on whatever treaty gets signed anyway. He's already making plans to go back on it. He has a history of organising assassinations just like this. So you can see why they would be like, maybe do I trust the dirty Mick?
Maybe this was him, but there's no definitive proof that it was. I don't know. I don't think it was.
Has he shot any of the lads who've been taking over the forecourts for the last month?
Well,
no, this does seem odd.
That's also been going on, since April at this point. So
it's also on home turf for them that they're like, whatever about us doing it to them in Ireland. That's you're going over to London and you're killing a member of Parliament.
Yeah. So Collins gets the blame for this assassination. Who knows? But Churchill, this is again just speculation, but what seems to happen is that Churchill pulls him up, or the Lloyd government, the British contingent, pulls them up on this. He either blames Collins or he blames the anti-treatyites, and they have been publicly, I guess, in the way of the treaty this whole time. They've occupied the forecourts, and Collins borrows 2 18-pounder artillery pieces from the British and bombards the forecourts until the lads surrender, which is a bad move.
Optics. Using British military weapons.
Yes, to shoot against the lads who he'd fought alongside. These are his compatriots. Like this.
That's basically the first serious act of the Irish Army.
Yeah, this is now. No, I'm not even going to say, to be fair, they've been occupying it for a long time. This is bad. This is the big thing this is the big issue I think people probably have with Collins. The treaty, people talk about the treaty and the signing of the treaty and blah, blah, blah. And I think, in the fullness of time, like Dev does do what Collins probably intended. It is a stepping stone. We work around it. We duck, we dive. Bombarding the lads that you fought alongside instead of, like, maybe the treaty would have fallen asunder, but the whole time Collins is like, I don't think they'll go to war. I don't think it matters. I don't think we'll all be fine. And then to do this, if you believe that, then why blow up your old friends? I don't know. This is the big unforgivable thing for me.
Yeah, well, it's also because we're looking at it's just over 6 years from 1916.
Yeah,
that this is not too dissimilar to something that Collins himself did.
Yes,
that you go in there, you make a stand, you don't believe in this, so you're going to use military force to make protests, and you go, and then so you've done the exact same. They've done the exact same thing that you did.
What he's done is not too dissimilar to what the British did to the GPO.
Yes,
yeah, it's very. There's a lot of parallels.
They didn't leave him in there for a couple of months, but still, at the end of it, that is what happened.
There's also an issue that they don't. The Dáil is not in sessions this time. They don't talk this through. Like Collins and Richard Mulcahy just decide this on their own. Not on their own, but like it's not put to a vote. But
put it to a vote afterwards, just like he did before with the treaty.
Well, the next time the Dáil takes place is September, by which point a lot of stuff has happened. This is the start of the Civil War, the shelling of the forecourts. 12th of July, Collins gives a little speech. He says, "It would be well, I think, if the government issued some sort of official instruction to me nominating the War Council of Three and appointed me to act by special order as Commander-in-Chief during the period of hostilities." So he basically makes a new role for himself and steps away from the government leading role and back into military Mick. But now he's kind of styled himself as this Commander-in-Chief. And this is where you get all the pictures of Mick in his military uniform. Is all from the 12th of July. He's assassinated about a month later, or he's shot about a month later. So it's all the pictures. All the pictures that you see of him are from like this period.
It's time to take 90% of the photos we have of on record of Michael Collins in this little tiny period.
Now, to be fair, I guess he's kind of famously a man who's not getting photos. Yeah. But he's still, as is Mick's style, even though he's now the military commander, he stepped away from the government. Obviously, he's still got his hand on the till. He's still keeping an eye on the government. But this is the start of the Civil War. It's proper anti-treaty right, pro-treaty right. They go back to guns. We're going to talk about, I guess, there's 2 or 3 big events that happen between then and his eventual assassination. But the first big one, 1st of August, Harry Boland dies. So on the 13th July, Harry Boland, he's sleeping rough in the Dublin foothills. He's on the run. He writes, "Can you imagine me on the run from Mick Collins? It's ludicrous." A little later during the last week of July, Boland also writes, "I will be the first to be killed because Mick knows that I know too much about him," which is a little suspicious, but he's a big Republican figure, and the whole events around his death are pretty weird. We've talked about it in the other episodes, but he's a big Republican figure. He's on the run. He's being hunted by Mick. On the 30th of July, he's openly walking around Dublin. He goes for lunch in like a very public restaurant. He's sort of strolling around. He gets the train from Connolly, Amiens Street Station at the time. He gets the train from there up to Belfast, but he gets off.
Yeah, he's had window seat in Dublin at that restaurant.
Like he's
sat
pretty.
in the,
it's also the same sort of stuff Mick was doing during the War of Independence, but it's an odd move to be like he's on the run, he's hiding in the hills, and all of a sudden he's strolling around having lunch. He hops on a train. He gets off the train and goes into the Grand Hotel in Skerries. And now this is where it all gets, no one really knows why this happens or what happens. But basically, troops go into the hotel. There is an incident. Basically he gets shot. He's either shot on purpose or it's by accident. There's some reports say he's armed. Some reports say he's unarmed. No one knows why he was being so open when he's walking around. One of the theories is that he was on his way to Dundalk to meet Mick. Mick is in the town sorting out the Dundalk jailbreak we talked about. But whatever it is, he gets shot and dies, and this is a big blow for Collins. He writes to King Kieran.
He's pulled out of he's got into the bed. He's pulled out of the bed by a bunch of Mick's men.
Yeah,
and it could be the lads without Mick's consent shot him because they know that he's Harry Boland. It could be that Mick tricked him and told him to come up and meet me in Dundalk and we'll settle all this out, and then he has the lads shoot him. It could just be that they heard Harry Boland was there and they were like, they didn't know that he was on the way up to secretly, covertly meet Mick Collins, so they went to go get him, and a lad had an itchy trigger finger and he was a young recruit, and a bullet went off and Harry Boland shot. Yeah,
so some event happens. He ends up dead. Yeah, who knows? It could have just been one of the narratives is there was like a young officer who was a bit jumpy and shot him by accident. But whatever it is, we have Collins writes to Kitty Kieran, and I passed Vincent's hospital and saw a crowd outside. My mind went into him, Harry, lying there dead, and I thought of the times together. I had sent a wreath. Nevertheless, I supposed they would return it torn up. So, yeah, he doesn't die immediately. He suffers from his gunshot. They bring him down to the hospital. There's also a little bit with the jewels there at that point. He gives them to his sister, I believe, but he dies, and Collins is obviously, he's feeling it. He's feeling remorse. Right, hot on the heels of that, 12th of August, Arthur Griffith drops dead at 50. They reckon, or maybe it's officially a cerebral hemorrhage, brain hemorrhage.
But it was a broken heart.
It was a broken heart. Even during the negotiations, they say that this is why Collins kind of ends up in the driver's seat, because Griffith's he's not well. He's kind of sick at that point. But at 50, he has a brain hemorrhage and he dies, drops dead out of nowhere. And this is another blow to Collins. Griffith had always kind of been the more visible, more political kind of side of the treaty organization, and now it's just Collins. So Boland, his old friend, dead. A couple of days later, his compatriot Griffith drops dead. On the 18th of August, there's an attempt at his life, which I don't think it's talked about too much, but there's another ambush on his life on the 18th of August outside Stillorgan. A load of lads jump out and start shooting at his convoy with his car. He's not with them at the time, but obviously the ambush lads don't know that, so they start firing at the car. But this doesn't really get reported in the media for some reason. There's a letter that Collins sends to Desmond Fitzgerald, who's the head of PR, head of propaganda. And he's like, fucking put that in the paper. Tell the lads about this. And he's like, it's not important. Desmond Fitzgerald, also Garrett Fitzgerald's dad. That's his old man.
What?
Yeah, future Taoiseach. And I left it out of the last episode. I couldn't remember his name. Remember I was saying during your favourite video, the Dáil Loan, where he's getting all the lads down and he invites the Minister of Propaganda down? It's Desmond Fitzgerald. When he makes his show of him, it's Gareth Fitzgerald's dad. So maybe now when he's getting shot at, Des is like, nah, I'm not going to publish that story. He ran a headline saying, everything fine. Bail na Blá, lovely this time of year. But this is leading up to the big one. Yeah, 22nd of August, his assassination. His last act, his last letter Mick's last letter, 21st of August, he writes out the structure for the tax revenue system. And he says, he basically
and
creates...
in such sold every man in the country
Yeah.
down the river.
One last fucking blow, one last slap in the face to this fine nation. He sets up the revenue and he says they should be in Dublin Castle. So he's only had the keys to the castle for about 6 months and already he's like, let the taxmen in it. This is Mick the admin
He has
man.
changed. He has changed.
This is who he always was deep down. He's an admin man, he's a numbers man. There's a kind of famous line that's always spoken about him where he's like, everyone got a receipt. He organized guerrilla warfare and ran an entire army off the back of a bicycle. He was cycling around, dropping money to lads who needed it. Not a penny was uncounted for. Everyone got a receipt. Everything was above board. But that's his last action. It's why the tax people love Collins so much. Day afterwards, he's heading down to Cork. He's not well. He's got a kidney infection. He's got a cold. It's been about 2 months since he shelled the forecourts. The country is in full-blown civil war. Boland is dead. Griffith is dead. They just tried to blow him up in Stillorgan. He's not happy.
Drunk as a skunk.
Yeah, see that I'm rolling back the whole he's drunk as a skunk thing. They had been drinking, but I couldn't find two. Emmett Dalton says they went drinking in Mick's cousin's bar, I think, that day, but I don't know if they're locked. Certainly what happens next is the activities of a man who's drunk, or the activities of a man who, given all those things I just said, maybe he's like, fuck it. I mean, this is all speculation,
But also, if you're Dalton, you're not turning around after the assassination going, hey, yeah, we were actually in 8 different bars and he had a pint with every single man in them and shook everyone's hand. And he got so drunk, he forgot his own tactics of never take the same route twice. And he drives back through the way he fucking came earlier on.
A lot of it, they say, is another maybe unattributed quote, but supposedly he said, they won't shoot me in my own county. But they're driving around doing inspections of areas in Cork. They go through a perfect place for an ambush called Bale na Blá, Mouth of the Flowers in Irish, and they are set to come back that same way later on that day. So there's an ambush set up for them. Supposedly a lot of the lads, they get tired of the ambush, they get bored, and they start heading on home. So by the time Collins comes back through, there's only a couple of people still left waiting for the ambush. It's the stragglers of the group. This is meant to be around 8 o'clock that evening.
It's 8 o'clock. The sun's kind of starting to set. It's realistically, it's another 2 hours of it.
Yeah. They start opening fire on the convoy. There's 3 cars in the convoy, and they start opening fire. Collins, uncharacteristically, stands ground and starts shooting back at them. So Dalton, again, this is from Dalton, and obviously, he might be a little bit biased, but he says that he told the convoy to get the hell out of there, drive like hell. But Collins says no and goes out and starts shooting back at them. It lasts about 15 to 20 minutes, after which Collins has been shot. So Dalton goes over to, I think they get rid of the guys, and then they go over to pick up Collins, and he's dead on the ground.
The only man shot.
He's the only man shot
killed.
in the whole convoy, the whole man shot. Dalton describes it as a big open wound. He says there's no exit wound. So they reckon it's consistent with like a ricochet bullet maybe. There's theory that it was one of his own guys shot him. I don't think so. I think, like a lot of things, the simplest narrative is probably the right one. Someone who was in the ambush shot, they were shooting at him for 15 minutes. It was unlucky or lucky, depending on what you look at it. They shot him in the head and either banged off the truck he was standing beside.
Or there's the other theory that says he decided to run out past his own cover and ran directly at them, and then his gun jammed and he was stood in no man's land with no protection.
There's a lot of speculation. Obviously, no one knows. It's gone to the grave of like the people that are involved.
The odds of him being the only person, I don't know if he's the only person shot, but he's definitely the only person who's killed.
He's the only person.
He's the only person. Yeah, and for that to be him, it does seem like there's accounts of him. Lads lost sight of him. That he was gone. He was running. They couldn't even cover him because they weren't standing up openly to So it's that does seem like it probably did happen.
But I mean, you've only really got the accounts of Emmett Dalton, and then like Sonny O'Neill is the guy that people kind of say.
Emmett Dalton, the famous scriptwriter.
Yeah, a man who knew how to write a story. Yeah, Emmett Dalton goes on to form Ardmore Studios after this. He's one of the men there with Collins on the day. That was one of the more bizarre connections in the research for this. He's the founder of Ardmore Studios. But so Sonny O'Neill, who's kind of, people say it was probably him that did it, he ends up getting a pension from the new government later on. But during his testimony before the Military Pensions Archive Board, O'Neill said He accidentally ran into the bail and the blow thing, Tom Hales and myself. We heard about the party going through in the morning. They took a wrong turn and went into Newcanstown. We went down to take a look at the position in bail and the blow. So, he doesn't obviously say during that meeting that he shot him, but there's so much speculation, so much conjecture about it. The people who say it was the British did it, people who say Dev did it. I think
Jonathan Rhys Myers.
with all the stuff that's happening leading up to it, it kind of seems like the actions of a man who's at his wit's end. To be standing out in the middle of the road just like firing blindly up into the hills and getting shot, I don't know. No one, it's another bar, I suppose, with the Collins story that's surrounded by myth. No one knows who pulled the trigger, but the end result is the same, that Collins is dead. And on the 24th of August, 1922, his body is carried out the door of number 56 St. Stephen's Green and brought up to Dublin City Hall. Collins is buried in Glasnevin, where, as we talked about briefly in the first episode, Dev, for some reason, changed his date of birth on his gravestone right before World War II. It's like the last bit of business he did before the emergency. But Collins' death is a big turning point or a big catalyst in the Civil War. Suppose the Civil War had only been going on for a couple of weeks at that stage. But between the deaths of Harry Boland, Griffith, and then Collins, three big negotiators, especially, I guess, Boland and Collins. So it kind of put an end to any hopes of reconciliation. The Civil War goes on to like April, May of the following year of 1923. But this only drives up tensions. It's a big blow to have the de facto head of state assassinated. But that's pretty much it. That's the end. That's the end of part 3 of Michael Collins. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed listening to it at home. If you've noticed anything that's glaringly wrong across the last 3 episodes, if you're busy shouting at your car radio as I was saying something wrong, do email in right into the show. You can message us on Instagram. We check that fairly regularly. Or send us an email at shitetalkhistory@gmail.com. We might do another bonus episode for Head Stuff Plus about, the aftermath and kind of a roundup of some of the cultural influences of Collins' deaths, the movies, the documentaries, all that sort of stuff. We'll talk about him a little bit more anyway when we do the Dev episodes. We've got 3 Dev episodes coming up at the end of the season. And largely, he kind of gets the blame for Collins dipping out of history. But we'll talk about all that and more at the end of the season. Between now and then, we'll have more just short, fun episodes, one-piece episodes about, I think the next one's going to be about Michael Flatley, and then the DeLorean, and then some other stuff that might be a bit more light. But it's good to be back. Thanks for listening to the Collins series, and we'll chat to you next week. Good luck.